There's something strange about modern life. In a world more connected than ever, many people feel lonelier than ever. We fear quiet evenings alone. We fear the silence when no one texts, no one calls. We fear the stillness when there's no sound, not even the buzz of a notification. But is loneliness really as frightening as we think? Through the lens of Buddhist wisdom, solitude isn't a void, it's a doorway, a sacred space where you can finally return to yourself. The Buddha taught that happiness doesn't come from others. It begins with understanding your own heart. And silence, true intentional silence, is the fertile soil where that understanding can grow. So, how do you learn to be alone without feeling lonely? How do you not only accept solitude, but actually embrace it as a gift? Let's explore 10 meditative and profound teachings from Buddhist philosophy that can help you find peace and happiness simply by being present with yourself. 1. Transform loneliness into a journey of self-discovery. Maybe you've had evenings where you sat quietly in a room, no voices, no messages, no sound beyond your own breathing. And in that moment, maybe you felt a little empty, a little lost, a feeling you couldn't quite name, one that people often call loneliness. But ask yourself, is loneliness really something to fear? Or is it only uncomfortable because we haven't learned how to be with ourselves? In Buddhist teaching, solitude isn't negative. In fact, it's a path, a mirror, a homecoming. Not to a place made of bricks and walls, but to the inner refuge of your own soul, a place where you don't need anyone else to feel whole. When the outside world gets too loud and rushed, solitude becomes the doorway to the world within, where truth, wisdom, and peace are always waiting. You are not the roles you carry. You're not just a parent, a partner, a coworker, or a friend. You are a human being with emotions, with longings, with a pure and unshaken essence that's never been lost. But have you ever paused long enough to ask, who am I when no one's watching? The Buddha said, in yourself is an island where no one else can go. Take refuge in that place. That island is your true presence. And the beautiful truth, you don't need to travel anywhere to find it. You only need a bit of courage to stay with yourself in stillness. Of course, it's not easy. We're taught that happiness must be shared, that joy only matters if someone else is around. But is that always true? How many times have you felt deeply alone, even in a crowded room? And how many times have you felt at peace, simply sitting by yourself in nature? The difference isn't about whether someone is beside you. It's about whether you are truly with yourself. Loneliness, when seen with clear eyes, is a rare and precious gift. It gives you space to stop, to listen, to hear the quiet voice inside you, the one you've ignored for too long, because life was too noisy. In the moments when no one's calling your name, that's when you finally get to call your own. Picture yourself in a quiet room. No phone, no TV, no conversation. At first, it might feel unbearable. Your mind will fidget like a restless child. It will beg for escape. But if you stay a little longer, and then a little longer still, something magical begins to happen. The noise softens. The armor drops. The worries, the fears, the judgments begin to fade. And behind all that, you meet someone you haven't met in a long time, real you. In Buddhist meditation, there's a practice called insight or vipassana. It means to look deeply into the nature of reality, and solitude is the perfect condition for that. When no one is watching, when you don't have to pretend to be okay, you can reflect on your life with honesty. You can ask the questions you've avoided. What am I really living for? Am I being true to what I feel? Am I living in alignment with what I believe matters most? And in that process, wisdom begins to grow. Wisdom doesn't come from books or borrowed opinions. It comes from turning inward, from noticing your habits, your patterns, your limiting beliefs, and also your hidden strengths, the seeds of goodness waiting to be nurtured. There's a verse in the Dhammapada that says, "Better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles." And how do you conquer yourself? First, you must know who you are. You must understand your own mind, where it's going, what it wants, what it fears, and what it longs for. Loneliness, then, is the perfect beginning. When you no longer fear being alone, you become your own best companion. And from that deep relationship with yourself, all your other relationships change. You no longer walk into someone's life with an empty heart, hoping they'll fill it. You come in full, ready to give, not just to receive. And here's the paradox. The more you enjoy your own company, the more others enjoy being around you. There's a quiet confidence in you, a grounded calm, a presence that feels like home. In a chaotic world, that kind of energy is rare and deeply needed. The Buddha never told us to hide from the world. He didn't say we must isolate. He simply taught, before you try to understand others, understand yourself. Before you look for love, learn to love yourself in silence. And before asking the world to treat you kindly, learn to be gentle with yourself when no one else is around. If solitude once made you uneasy, perhaps now you'll see it differently. Not as a dark, lonely corner, but as a lighted path back to your own center. And maybe, just maybe, in one of those still afternoons, you'll smile, not because someone else is there to make you happy, but because you've learned how to be fully present with yourself. Because true happiness isn't found in being loved by someone else. It's found in no longer abandoning yourself for anyone. And from there, solitude is no longer something to escape. It becomes something to be grateful for. 2. Developing silent strength, the inner stability that doesn't depend on others. There's a kind of strength that no one sees. It doesn't boast. It doesn't need applause or approval. It doesn't shout or demand attention. But when it's present, your entire inner world becomes still, like a quiet lake at dawn. In Buddhism, we call this silent strength, a groundedness that comes from within. It isn't shaken by praise or blame. It doesn't depend on who's beside you or whether anyone sees your worth. Have you ever seen a mountain stand still in the middle of a storm? The winds may howl, thunder may roar, but the mountain does not move. It doesn't need to prove anything. It seeks no validation. It simply is. Likewise, the person who can live alone without feeling empty, without feeling less than, has begun to touch a different kind of power. One that doesn't cling, doesn't depend, and doesn't need to be seen to know it has value. Do you remember the last time you truly felt enough, even when no one was around? A quiet afternoon with no calls. An evening walk alone. A silent meal with only the sound of slow chewing and your steady breath. What did you feel? Loneliness or peace? In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "The mindful person never gets lost in the world. True strength doesn't come from how many people surround you, but from your ability to stay grounded when you're by yourself." The problem is, we're so used to measuring our worth through the eyes of others. If someone loves us, we feel lovable. If someone praises us, we feel valuable. If someone walks beside us, we feel strong. But if all of that disappears, what remains? Many people fear silence, not because silence is dangerous, but because in the quiet, they don't know how to be with themselves. They don't know who they are without a role to play or someone watching. But it's exactly in that space that Buddhism arrives like a gentle lantern, not blinding, but just bright enough to guide you back to yourself. The Buddha said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." He didn't say, "Go find someone to light your way." He didn't say, "You need someone else to understand you before you can feel at peace." He simply reminded us the light is already in you. All you have to do is turn inward. And silence, that's where that light first begins to flicker. When you can live alone, not because you're forced to, but because you no longer need someone's presence to feel seen. When you no longer require comforting words to feel okay. When you know who you are and what truly matters in your life, then you have found a strength no one can take away. Those with silent strength don't need to win, don't need to be right, don't even need to be loved. Not because they're cold, but because they are no longer bound by those things. They don't feel enough because someone says so. They're enough because they know it deep within. And here's the beautiful thing: when you're strong within yourself, the outside world doesn't feel so overwhelming anymore. You no longer chase relationships out of fear of being alone. You don't exhaust yourself proving your worth through work status or society's gaze. You don't seek someone to fill a void because you've become your own source of light in the dark. I once met a widowed woman in California living alone for nearly 20 years. No children, no close family. Sounds lonely, right? But every time I visited her, there was something remarkable. Her little house never felt empty. There were green plants, soft music, the smell of fresh bread, and a stack of meditation books on the table. She once told me, "Dear Venerable, I've never felt stronger. In my younger years, I lived for my husband for society. Now, I live for me. And I've learned to love myself in the silence." That is the silent strength the Buddha taught. It needs no crutches, no outside support. Just a heart anchored in mindfulness, clear enough to know what truly nourishes us and what is illusion. Today's world praises hustle, achievement, and standing out. But in Buddhism, sometimes the strongest person is the one who can sit quietly doing nothing, not because they don't care, but because they're no longer driven by the fear of losing. So, if you're walking through a season of solitude, don't rush to label yourself weak. Perhaps this is the exact turning point life is offering you to grow stronger from within. Perhaps this is where the Dharma gently reaches out, not to pull you out of loneliness, but to help you see where you're standing now. Might be the perfect launchpad for inner transformation. And maybe one day, after you've learned to rest deeply in yourself, you'll look back at the time you once called lonely and smile, because it was in that very silence that you became someone no wind could shake. Steady like a mountain, still like a morning lake, strong without needing to prove it. That is the quiet gift of silent strength. 3. Redefining loneliness as a sacred space. There are days when the world just feels too loud. The news is constant. Notifications keep flashing. Conversations go on, yet leave you empty. And in all that noise, what you truly need isn't more people. It's less static, less sound, less performing, less answering. To many, loneliness feels like sadness. But for someone walking the path of awakening, loneliness becomes a threshold, a space, a sacred doorway not everyone is ready to enter. There's a term in Buddhism I find deeply beautiful: mindfulness of the body in the body. It means returning to this very body, to the breath, to the steps, to the beat of your heart, with full awareness. And that kind of presence, you can't find it in a loud room or when your mind is chasing other people's noise. You need space. That space might be a quiet corner of your room, a morning with no phone, a silent cup of tea, a walk down an empty road. But more than anything, it's the space within you. A space where you no longer need to prove yourself, no longer need to be understood, no longer need to seem fine. You simply are. Have you ever spent an evening without turning on the TV, without music, no scrolling, no texting? Just you, a soft light, and your breath. If you resist the urge to fill the silence, something small, something true, something very, you begins to speak. That is you, not you as a parent, a worker, or someone admired, but you when all the masks are off. In that moment, loneliness is no longer a punishment. It becomes a ceremony, a sacred space where you're allowed to return, allowed to be soft, allowed to sigh without having to explain anything to anyone. In the middle-length discourses, the Buddha shared how he would often retreat into deep forests to meditate alone. He called it noble solitude, a quiet away from worldly noise where one can clearly see the mind. He didn't seek solitude to escape people. He entered it to meet himself, to witness each rising mental formation in mindfulness. And so can you. You don't need to climb a mountain or disappear into the woods to find that sacred space. Right in your home, in your ordinary day, you can create it if you have the courage to turn down the noise and turn up the light of presence. With practice, you'll realize something profound. Sometimes, the time you spend alone heals you more than any conversation could, because in that space, you don't have to explain. You don't have to edit your feelings. You don't have to act like a more acceptable version of yourself. You just have to be. And that, my friend, is your Buddha nature awakening. In Buddhism, Buddha nature isn't some faraway ideal. It's your inner clarity, your original compassion. But in this busy life, we forget. We lose ourselves in roles, in praise, in social media, in the calendar. And then we feel empty, not because we lack people, but because we haven't met ourselves in a very long time. Loneliness, when embraced with a mindful heart, becomes a doorway to your truest essence. At first, it might feel like less, but soon it transforms into enough. Not the kind of enough that comes from adding, but the kind that comes from letting go. Letting go of noise, of expectation, of control. I once met a man in Oregon, long divorced, living alone in a small cabin in the woods. He told me, "People think I live in isolation, but I've never lived closer to myself than I do now. I'm not lonely. I'm just finally with me, and I've learned to cherish that." He had turned his little house into a meditation sanctuary. Nothing fancy, just a few Buddha images, a cushion the sound of wind and birds, and a heart quiet enough to listen. You can do the same right where you are with the time you already have. A sacred space doesn't need precious stones. It's made of silence and the courage to face yourself without running. So, if you're feeling lonely, don't rush to escape it. Just pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, do I need more people right now, or do I simply need less noise? Maybe it's time for a date with yourself, one you've been postponing for too long. And in that silence, you'll begin to hear what you've been missing all along. The voice of your own heart. Loneliness will no longer feel like an empty room, but a sacred temple. An invisible Zen sanctuary where the Buddha within you is already smiling, welcoming you home. 4. Mastering the art of deep conversations with yourself. Have you ever asked yourself, I've lived all these years, but have I ever truly sat down and listened to myself? I don't mean asking things like, what do I want to eat today? Or, am I tired? I mean really listening. The way you would listen to a dear friend who's just been through a storm of emotion. That my friend is an art. The art of having a meaningful conversation with yourself. And truthfully, not many of us know how to do that. You see, society teaches us how to speak, how to be clever, how to be right, how to be pleasing to others. But rarely does it teach us how to listen. Especially not how to listen inwardly. We're taught to look outside for advice from books, the internet friends, mentors. But the quiet voice inside the one that whispers with gentleness and depth often goes unheard, forgotten. In Buddhism, this act of inner reflection isn't about self-judgment. It's a practice of deep compassion. The Buddha once said the mind is the forerunner of all things. If you don't understand your own mind, you can't possibly understand the world. And if you don't know what your heart truly longs for, you're just drifting, pulled by the tides of noise, opinion, and old patterns that aren't even yours. So no talking to yourself isn't strange. It's not weakness. It's a vital part of living with awareness. Imagine this every morning. You take a few quiet minutes to write in a journal. Simple questions like, what am I feeling today? Or am I being honest with myself, not for anyone else, just for you? You don't need perfect answers, just honesty, just space for your inner voice to speak. Over time, you begin to recognize yourself the way someone recognizes a lifelong friend, with kindness, without filters. without pretending. I once knew an elderly Japanese-American woman, nearly 80 years old. She wrote in her journal every day. When I asked her, "Who do you write for?" she smiled and said, "For my heart to read." She told me that some days she didn't even know if she was sad or tired. But when she wrote, her emotions would rise to the surface like morning mist melting under the sun. Writing wasn't for recording the past. It was for connecting to the now and for healing. In the Buddhist tradition, journaling is like meditating with words. Every sentence is a gentle step back home to yourself. No need to sound wise. No need to be organized. Just truth. Just presence. And beyond writing, meditation itself is one of the most powerful ways to talk with yourself without even saying a word. Many people misunderstand meditation. They think it's about emptying the mind, but it's really about seeing the mind clearly. Like sitting beside a river, not trying to stop the water, just watching it flow. Thoughts, worries, doubts, hopes, fears, they rise and fall. And you just sit there quietly as your own loyal companion. Here's a strange truth. We spend so much of our lives trying to understand others, our partners, our children, our parents, our friends, but so little time understanding ourselves. And when you don't understand yourself, you end up craving validation from the outside. You need others to tell you you're good enough, that you're lovable, that you're doing the right thing, that you're on the right path. But that becomes exhausting. It makes you dependent and eventually lost. Only when you begin having deep conversations with yourself do you realize what truly matters to you, what you're actually living for, what's really yours, and what's just borrowed from others. The Buddha never handed out enlightenment like a gift. He simply pointed the way, the walking that's on you. And sometimes, all you need to start is to sit quietly, take a deep breath, and ask yourself one gentle question. Am I being true to myself today? Don't fear the silence, because it's in that stillness where wisdom rises. The deepest truths don't shout, they whisper, and they only come when you're quiet enough, honest enough, and brave enough to listen. And you know what? If you practice this long enough, you'll become your own best friend. The kind of friend who never leaves, who doesn't judge, who doesn't push you to be anything other than what you are. A friend who sits with you in your joy, your pain, your weariness, and simply listens. The world will keep changing. People will come and go. But if you learn how to befriend yourself, you'll always have a place to return to, no matter what's happening around you. Deep conversations with yourself aren't a luxury. They're a practice, a daily choice, a quiet path back to understanding, to kindness, and to living your life with presence and truth. Because at the end of the day, if you don't understand and love yourself, who will? 5. Embracing the paradox of presence. The more present you are, the less lonely you feel. There's a quiet paradox in life, one that reveals itself only when we slow down enough to see it clearly. The more fully present you are with yourself, the less lonely you become. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? After all, you're still sitting there alone, no one to talk to, no laughter echoing around you, no warm hand holding yours. But something shifts when you are truly present in that moment, fully awake, fully aware. Loneliness begins to melt, like morning mist under sunlight, and what's left is peace. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful word for this kind of presence, mindfulness. But it's not just about paying attention. It's about being deeply here. When you're washing dishes, you simply wash. When you walk, you just walk. You're not replaying yesterday. You're not bracing for tomorrow. You're not drifting through daydreams. You are here, right now. Have you ever eaten a meal without checking your phone, watching TV, or talking to anyone? Just eating. Slowly chewing, tasting each bite. Listening to the sound of your own chewing. Noticing the colors on your plate. If you've ever done that, you've touched the feeling of true presence, and you've also touched the reason why presence dissolves loneliness. Because the deepest loneliness isn't about missing other people. It's about being disconnected from yourself. When your body is in one place, but your mind is elsewhere, you're not really alive. You're just passing through life. And in that disconnection, you feel empty. Like someone's been walking beside you all this time, but you've never really met them. That someone is you. In one of the sutras, the Buddha said, "A person who does not know how to live with themselves will feel lonely even in a crowd." This isn't judgment, it's an invitation. You could be surrounded by people immersed in events and still feel like a stranger in your own life. It's possible to live for years and never once truly feel your own emotions. To smile politely while your heart feels like an abandoned forest. To care deeply for others yet forget how to return home to yourself. But presence, real, gentle, mindful presence is that return. It's coming back after being away too long. It's sitting with yourself without rushing, without avoiding, without judging. It's breathing and knowing you're breathing. It's feeling sadness and allowing it to be there without needing to fix it. It's being there with yourself, like reuniting with an old friend. When you learn to be present, something beautiful happens. You begin to feel a kind of quiet joy. Not the excitement of pleasure, but the serenity of belonging. It's like finding shelter in the rain while the world outside is spinning. This presence not only eases your loneliness, it awakens you to something sacred, life itself. Because only when you're present are you truly alive. If your mind is tangled in worry about the future or stuck grieving the past, you're not really living. You're merely existing. And maybe, just maybe, loneliness is not always about missing someone. Sometimes it's life ringing a bell, reminding you that you have been absent for too long, that you've been watching a replay of your life instead of stepping onto the real stage. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Start small. When you pour a glass of water, really pour it. When you walk, feel each foot touching the ground. When you're sad, sit with the sadness. Breathe with it, like it's a part of you that's been waiting to be heard. Because what you're searching for isn't out there. It's not in someone else's eyes. It's not in loud conversations or quick embraces. It's in the quiet depths of your own presence when you finally come home to yourself. And when you can do that, when you can be alone without feeling empty, without feeling lost, then you're no longer lonely. Even if the world turns away, even if no one understands you, even if your phone stays silent for days, because you are here now. And that is one of the most sacred reunions a human being can experience. You don't need more to feel whole. You just need to stay with yourself in this very moment and realize you were never missing anything to begin with. 6. Create a personal world that awakens your soul. There's something profoundly beautiful that only those who've walked through silence can truly understand. When you no longer seek joy outside of yourself, you begin to discover a quiet, nourishing kind of joy within a world of your own. Not crowded, not loud, but deeply alive, and more fulfilling than anything you've ever known. This world isn't far away. It begins in a quiet corner of your home, in unhurried mornings, in the soft sound of a spoon stirring tea, in a page of handwritten thoughts before the day begins, in a peaceful walk through the park at sunset. It's an inner universe where your soul breathes freely, where even the smallest things can become sacred if you see them through awakened eyes. In Buddhism, this is called dwelling in the present moment, being fully alive to what is happening right now, and gently nurturing what makes your heart feel soft, inspired, and whole. When you start caring for your inner world like a garden, even the smallest actions become ways to cultivate happiness. Have you ever read a book with no goal in mind, just because each page brought you peace? Brewed a cup of tea slowly, simply, to enjoy the warmth in your hands. Walked through nature without music, without your phone, just listening to the rustling leaves, the breeze, your own breath, moving gently through your chest. These moments, tiny as they seem, are how you build a world that isn't noisy, a world that doesn't depend on anyone's approval, a world that lights up your spirit like a candle in the dark. And the most beautiful part, that world is always available. It doesn't require wealth or status. It only asks that you be here truly present and tender enough to notice the simple joys already waiting for you to come home. I once met a man in Colorado who lived alone in a wooden cabin nestled among pine trees. When I asked if he ever felt lonely, he smiled and said no. Each morning starts with birdsong and the smell of coffee. I have music. I have books. I have trails to walk. And I have myself a friend I've learned to love again. He didn't chase the world. He created his own a world that nourished his spirit like a monastery without walls. The Buddha once said, "If you know contentment, you can feel rich, even lying beneath a tree." When you learn to build a simple, fulfilling space around you, you no longer need much from the outside world. You don't need loud parties, noisy relationships, or endless praise to feel your life has meaning. Your inner world, if lovingly cared for, can become a sanctuary. And you become the keeper of that sacred fire. A soft meditation song at the end of the day, a quiet corner with incense, or a painting you love, a notebook just for things you're grateful for, a chair by the window where sunlight falls in the afternoon. Each of these, when touched with love, can make your spirit feel rich, alive, and lit from within. And when your inner world feels full, you'll no longer need the outside world to complete you. You'll move through life not from a place of emptiness, but from inner power, a quiet stream flowing inside you, always ready to refresh your own soul and the lives of those around you. Because a person who has built a home inside themselves never wanders even when alone. And you can begin creating that home today. You don't have to wait for retirement or when things settle down. You can start with a peaceful morning where you don't check your phone, an evening without the news, a moment where you write your true feelings, a meal you cook just for yourself, a night spent sitting by candlelight, breathing deeply, simply being here. The more you care for this world, the more it grows, and soon it becomes the place you return to every time life feels uncertain, like a safe haven in the middle of the universe. No one can take it from you. No one can destroy it, because it doesn't live out there. It lives within you. A world of your own, where you can be fully yourself, where every moment is worth living, where happiness doesn't need to be validated or shared. It only needs you to be present enough to receive it. 7. Freeing yourself from the trap of constant stimulation. Have you ever sat down intending to rest, only to find your hand automatically reaching for your phone? 1 minute you're checking one app and the next you're swiping into another. Watching one video turns into a dozen. Before you know it, the day is gone, your mind feels overwhelmed, and you don't even know what you were really looking for. It's not your fault. This is the trap of modern life, where constant stimulation has become the norm. The endless pings of messages, breaking news, updates, social media likes, all of it makes you feel connected, entertained, and engaged. But in truth, you're being swept away from yourself. The Buddha taught that the mind is the root of everything. When the mind is unsettled, even a life of comfort feels restless. But when the mind is still, you can live in a noisy world and still carry a quiet sky within you. But how can you stay grounded when the world around you moves so fast, so loud, always demanding a reaction? The answer begins with one simple word: stop. Pause. Not because you're weak, but because you're clear-headed enough to resist the crowd. Stop, not to escape, but to return inward. Stop, so you can finally hear your true inner voice, the one often drowned out by the world's noise. Have you noticed how being busy feels like the default? That without a packed schedule or incoming messages, you feel empty. We're not just addicted to entertainment. We're addicted to being busy, as if doing nothing means being worthless. Yet here's the paradox. It's in that nothingness that clarity begins to emerge. When you stop, turn off the phone, the TV, the noise, and simply sit with yourself, that's when you're truly alive. I once met a Zen master in Northern California. Every morning he walked slowly around the monastery holding a bamboo stick, saying nothing, carrying nothing. I asked him, "What do you think about during your walk?" He smiled and said, "Nothing, just walking." Every step is its own answer. That is the power of stillness. No stimulation, no entertainment, just breathing, just walking, just being. In that quiet return to the simplicity of life, you begin to reclaim your peace. But it takes practice. And above all, it takes courage to sit alone with yourself when there's nothing left to distract you. Because in that silence, old emotions begin to surface: anxiety, hurt, fear, emptiness. But don't run, because only when you stay present with them can you finally be free of them. The noisier the world becomes, the more we need to create silent spaces. Not for updates, not for replies, but just to be. You can start small: a meal without a screen, an hour in the morning without your phone, a walk without headphones, a Saturday evening journaling in silence. As you cut back on stimulation, you'll notice something returning: your clarity. Your intuition becomes sharper. The awareness you thought you'd lost it was always there, just buried under too much input. The Buddha once said, "The mind is like clear water. When undisturbed, it reflects everything." But if you're pouring in hundreds of notifications, thousands of images, endless scrolling, how can the mind ever be still? Only when you start subtracting can you begin to add what truly matters: presence, insight, peace. Some may ask, but won't life feel boring without scrolling or watching something? The key isn't about cutting everything out. It's about becoming conscious. Entertainment isn't the problem. Information isn't evil. But unconscious consumption is where we begin to lose ourselves. When you start living more simply, more intentionally, more slowly, life stops feeling dull. In fact, you start noticing beauty in what once seemed ordinary: the morning light, the sound of water, a bird's song, the gentle rhythm of your breath. Your mind becomes like a room, finely cleaned, fresh, open, breathable. And only then can you truly live, not controlled by the world outside, but rooted in the stillness within. Freeing yourself from the trap of constant stimulation doesn't mean walking away from life. It means learning to walk through it mindfully, calmly, and awake. Not pulled, not drained, not lost, but fully here, simple, clear, and free. 8. Use your time alone to cultivate compassion and gratitude. There's something deeply sacred that happens when you sit alone in silence. No one is calling your name. No one needs your attention. And for once, there's nothing pulling you away from yourself. It's in these seemingly lonely moments that you begin to feel the deepest kind of connection, not with the noisy world out there, but with the quiet, sacred space within you, and with everyone who has ever passed through your life. Silence has a mysterious power. It doesn't just calm the mind, it opens the heart. In Buddhism, metta, or loving kindness, isn't something reserved for saints or monks. It's a daily practice. A quiet thought of goodwill, a soft gaze, a silent prayer you offer to another being. And when you're alone, when you're not busy doing anything, that's often when you become most capable of being someone deeply compassionate. Have you ever sat in stillness and suddenly thought of your aging parents, the ones you haven't called in weeks? Have you ever found yourself in meditation and an old friend appears in your mind, someone who once hurt you, or someone who once loved you deeply but drifted away with time? These moments may feel random, but they're sacred invitations. Opportunities to soften, to expand, to love quietly. You don't have to speak. You don't have to do anything grand. Just breathe. place your hand over your heart and silently offer a blessing. May you be well. May you live with ease. May you be free from suffering. And here's the miracle. As you send that energy out into the world, you begin to heal too. The Buddha once said, "Holding loving kindness in your heart is like carrying cool water with you. Wherever you go, you refresh not only others, but your own soul." And silence, especially when you're alone, is the perfect vessel for that practice. You don't need to be outgoing. You don't need to lead a group or stand on a stage. To grow compassion, all you need is a heart willing to open each time you sit in solitude. Picture this. It's early morning. The world is still asleep. You close your eyes and bring to mind the people you love. Your mother living miles away, an old friend in a far-off city, a child you once saw crying in the rain, or even a younger version of yourself. The one who once fell down, who once broke, yet kept trying. When you sit quietly and practice gratitude, you don't just remember the good, you reshape your heart. You train it to be softer, wider, and wiser. Gratitude is not just saying thank you. Gratitude is when you pause and realize I'm still here. And nothing should be taken for granted. Not this breath, not the roof over your head, not the hot meal, not the sound of birds outside your window. When life moves too fast, we feel poor. But when we slow down, we realize we've been rich all along. Rich because we still have love to give. Rich because we still have the capacity to offer kindness. And rich because even when we're alone, we can still feel the warmth of our own heart. You might live alone, shop alone, sip your tea in solitude, sleep in a quiet room. But if your heart is full of compassion and gratitude, you are never truly alone. In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha's famous teaching on loving kindness, he said, "Radiate loving kindness as a mother protects her only child without boundaries, without condition." And to do that, you don't need to save the world. You don't need a stage. You just need a quiet morning, a still soul, and a heart willing to love in silence. Solitude, when used wisely, is the most fertile soil for compassion to blossom. And then you begin to understand. There's a kind of connection that needs no touch, no words, no physical presence, yet it stirs your heart deeply. It's the connection born from energy, from quiet presence, from unconditional love and unshakable gratitude. When you live like this, aloneness is no longer emptiness. It becomes fullness, a sacred state where you no longer seek validation from outside, because you have become your own steady flame, a gentle, radiant, and silent source of light burning peacefully from within. 9. True happiness begins when you no longer need anyone to validate your worth. There's a phase in life, maybe you've been through it, where we constantly look outside ourselves for proof that we're good enough. A nod from someone we admire, a compliment from a colleague, a few likes on social media, a kind word from an old friend. It's as if we're not just living, we're trying to be seen as worthy, seen as okay, seen as chosen. And so without even realizing it, we begin to shape ourselves around what others might approve of. We say what's easy to hear, even if it's not fully honest. We walk paths that earn applause, even when our heart longs for another direction. We smile when we want to cry. We stay silent when we ache to speak. We accept when we want to say no, just to feel accepted. But what happens when no one's clapping anymore? When no one is around to tell you that you're kind, or accomplished, or lovable? When one day the praise fades, the eyes stop watching, and even the most familiar relationships fall silent, will you still believe you matter? It's not an easy question, but it's an essential one. In Buddhism, there's a powerful teaching: self-knowing, self-trusting, self-liberating. Know yourself. Trust yourself. Free yourself. No one else can do this work for you. And as long as your sense of worth depends on outside approval, you're still a stranger to yourself. Have you ever watched a child dance without waiting for applause? Laugh without needing praise? Draw wildly, not caring if it's good? That's because they haven't yet learned to doubt themselves. They haven't been conditioned to wait for someone else to say, "You're enough." But adults, we lose ourselves somewhere along the way. In expectations, in comparisons, in standards that the world has drawn for us. And we call that growing up. But true maturity through the lens of the Dharma is not about proving, it's about seeing clearly. In solitude, something we often fear becomes the greatest classroom for this lesson. When you're alone, no roles to play, no titles to lean on, no relationships to define you. You finally stand face to face with your truest mirror yourself. In that mirror, you'll see hidden doubts, silenced voices within, longings you were afraid to name. You'll realize how many things you've done just for approval, not because they truly mattered to you. And maybe in that sacred quiet, you'll begin again. No more needing someone to confirm your worth. No more waiting to be chosen. Just living as though you've already been chosen by life, by breath, by the clear wisdom that has always been inside you, waiting for your stillness to reveal it. The Buddha once said, "No one can save you but yourself. No one can walk your path for you." It's not a statement of isolation. It's a reminder your worth doesn't come from others. It rises from your own awakening. You might lose a job. A relationship might end. Friends might grow distant. But if you truly know who you are, you will not fall apart. If you've seen the light within you, you won't need to chase the lights outside. I once met a woman in Seattle, a retired school teacher, living alone in a small apartment. She used to be everything to everyone: a wife, a mother, a beloved teacher. But when the kids moved out, her husband passed, and her circle grew quiet. She told me she felt invisible. No one called. No one needed her. No one said her name. Then one day, she began to write not for anyone else to read, but just for herself. She wrote what she loved, what she feared, what she never dared to admit out loud. She wrote to remember that she was still alive. And in those quiet afternoons by the window, she started to feel valuable again. Not because someone told her she was, but because she could feel it. That's a different kind of happiness, the light kind. The kind that doesn't depend on trophies or applause. The kind that comes from returning to yourself, seeing yourself, accepting yourself fully without conditions. And when you live from that place, every action carries peace. You love not to be loved back. You give not for recognition. You live not to be seen, but simply to be. A person like that is hard to break, hard to manipulate, hard to diminish with criticism or cold stares, because they've learned to stand alone, not proudly, but firmly, not isolated, but free. And that perhaps is one of life's most profound achievements, to sit in stillness and ask yourself with honesty, am I still waiting for someone to tell me I deserve to live a full, whole life? 10. Transforming past memories into present wisdom. There are nights so silent that old memories find their way back to you. They don't knock. They don't ask. They arrive like a gentle breeze, carrying familiar faces, distant voices, choices you once made, some right, some wrong, and moments you tried to forget. And in that quiet solitude, you can finally face them. No need to run. No need to fake being busy. No need to smile to hide the ache. That's the gift of stillness. A space calm enough to hear yourself, to look back on the past, not with old emotions, but with new eyes. The eyes of someone who's grown. Have you ever done something you regret? Trusted the wrong person? Missed a chance? Lost yourself trying to please someone else? It's okay. Because in Buddhist teachings, no experience is ever wasted if you can meet it with mindfulness. The Buddha said, "From the mud, the lotus blooms." In the same way, from your memories, whether they're mistakes, heartbreaks, or losses, you can grow something rare wisdom. But that wisdom doesn't come if you keep avoiding. It comes when you're brave enough to look back, not with judgment, but with compassion. When you meditate or simply sit quietly by yourself, memories may rise. Your chest might tighten. Your eyes might sting. But don't turn away. Let them come and go, like clouds passing through the sky. You don't have to hold on. You don't have to push them away. Just gently observe and ask, what can I learn from this? 1. One failure can teach humility. One heartbreak can teach compassion. One loss can teach gratitude for what remains. And sometimes the one who left becomes your greatest teacher in love. Not romantic love, but a love beyond attachment and expectations. I once met a man who lost his wife in his early 40s. He lived alone for many years after. One day, I asked him, "Don't you get lonely?" He smiled and said, "At first, yes. But over time, I realized being alone lets me sit with my memories, not to be sad, but to understand. I learned to see my past marriage not with regret, but with gratitude. My wife didn't leave me. She left me the best part of herself, so I could live the rest of my life fully." That story stayed with me because it reminded me, the past isn't meant to trap you. It's meant to teach you. It's meant to remind you not to hurt, but to help you see how far you've come and who you've become. In one sutra, the Buddha said, "The wise do not drown in memories, but neither do they reject them." You don't have to forget your past to be happy. You just need to look at it with awareness, to see that every stumble carried a hidden gift. You're no longer the person you were yesterday. But if you don't understand who that person was, what they felt, what they wanted, what they misunderstood, you might keep walking the same road, just wearing a new face. And that's the power of solitude, the kind that's quiet and honest. It lets you shine a light inward without blame, only understanding. Loneliness, when embraced with courage, becomes the place where you can be reborn. Not by erasing the past, but by transforming it into wisdom. I've met many people who've said, "I wish I'd never met that person. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish the past could just disappear." But look closer, and you'll see. That person, that choice, that past, shaped the you who's here today. You can learn to be grateful, even for the painful things. Grateful to the one who hurt you, because now you know how you deserve to be treated. Grateful for the old wound, because it taught you how to heal. Grateful for your mistakes, because they taught you the value of honesty. And when you begin to live this way, the past is no longer a shadow chasing you. It becomes a teacher, a quiet, patient, and profound teacher. People often think maturity means forgetting the past. But in Buddhism, maturity means transforming it, not erasing it, not clinging to guilt, but using it as soil to grow a new flower. And so every time you sit alone in silence, those old memories don't have to hurt. They become reminders that you've walked many paths. You've lived, you've loved, you've fallen, you've risen. And now, here you are, with a heart that knows more clearly what's true, what's false, what's worth carrying, and what's time to let go. And in the end, if anything remains after all those quiet moments, it's you. Not the you in someone else's eyes, but your truest, most peaceful, most grounded self. Loneliness, when seen with mindfulness, is no longer something to fear, but a doorway to wisdom, compassion, and a freedom no one can take from you. If today's reflection touched your heart, help us share this peace with others. Please subscribe to the Buddhism Seeds channel. Hit like, share this video with someone you care about, and leave a comment below. What have you learned from being alone? Every seed of understanding you plant today can bloom into something beautiful tomorrow. And we're honored to walk beside you on that journey.